Good morning. Thank you all for being here. I'm pleasantly surprised to see a number here. I'm Win Hartman. I'm the president of the Middlesex Heritage Group.
How y'all doing?
We have our president, Dan Robison, the town historian of Middlesex.
Hi.
And I want to thank Larry Lewis for all his support here, and Debbie for all the support, and Ryan and Larry put the picture up, which weighs about 47 pounds or something like that. And if that picture comes out, I think the wall is coming. First of all, we're going to be filming this, so anybody here who's in the witness protection program, maybe I know Brian's grandfather went to the school. Anybody else have relatives who went to this school?
Yeah, we all did, didn't we? Oh, yeah, we did.
Yeah, thank you.
Did you raise your hand?
I'm gonna ask that question again. If you missed the first time.
Well, I'll check to make sure you same form. All right, so this is pretty informal. We have a conservator here, Gary Albright. Thank you. I got in front of a crowd, I sort of stopped seeing Gary, so unaccustomed I am to speaking in public. So we're going to have three people speak today. We have Elaine Hilton who's going to talk about the school. We have Ken Poole here, who actually has just written a book about Jane Loomis, who painted the picture. Is that correct?
Pretty much.
Well, you told me 5 minutes ago. I thought it was very-
You got it.
Then we'll have Gary Albright talk about the process of the refurbishing of the picture. So, if you have any questions, ask those three. Otherwise, at the end, we have some cake, and we have coffee there. Maybe we'll drink coffee. And so,
I'm going to move.
Elaine, go. Go over a little.
It's like seeing an old friend. I wonder how many people here remember seeing this picture and others at the Middlesex Valley Central School. Yeah. And I don't remember exactly where it was. We know there were, I think, 7 big pictures all around. I think all on the first floor. Doesn't matter, but I think they didn't make it upstairs. But I remember seeing them there as we went down the halls. And for some reason, somebody in their wisdom decided they needed to come down. And I'm not sure we know why. You don't know that, Barb, right? But they did come down and they went into storage. I think in the bus garage, in the boiler room, at different places around. And thanks to, I think, pretty much largely Ruth Clark, mother of Barb, sister of Tom here. She was our town historian and said, we need to get those pictures saved. And managed to get them donated back, well, donated to the Middlesex Heritage Group. So we have saved them. Oh, here's a, yeah. I know that Ruth, I think she refinished the frames on several of them. I don't know if they had gotten banged up and things like she used to tell me about. Yep, I had it all laid out in the garage and stripped the old paint off and redid them. So I don't know what the status is. Anyway, I have lots of sources I went to find out about the Roundstone Schoolhouse. I heard about it all my life, I guess. And, well, one of my big sources is this book, which my mother decided she needed to preserve the story of the Roundstone School through the door. And she told it from the vantage point of the door. Yeah, when they opened me, they went in da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And she, Scarlett, my sister, her daughter, helped her with all the layout and getting it printed. And it was, I'm not sure how long she had been thinking about writing a book, but when she ended up with terminal cancer, that moved her on to, gotta get that book done. And Scarlett tells about taking it to the printer. Yeah, hurry this up. It's got to get done, and it did. She had interviewed some of the students, asked them for their memories, and source of, you know, what I did. Okay, I got another. Well, that is the question I was gonna ask. Who had ancestors that went to this school? Yeah. Or, okay, maybe, or, you know, is there anybody here who attended a one-room school? Attended a one-room school. I was hoping we were gonna have somebody that might, maybe she'll still show up, that I know did attend a one-room school, so I'll reserve that. Okay. So the school was built, well, let's take ourselves back to the 1800s, early 1800s. We're observing our Yates County bicentennial this year, right? 1823. The farmers started coming into this area, settling, building log houses. The first school in that neighborhood was a log, probably had been a house. That happened quite frequently. People built a bigger house and school became, they opened the school in the log house. But in 1837 or so, they decided they needed a real school. And so we're fortunate, we do have sources. I don't know if you can see this. Well, no, that's not one, but we have copies of the clerk's records from 1838 when they decided we need to go to school and we're going to build it out of stones. How they decided on that particular, I mean, they were building a lot of houses around at that time, but a school was pretty unusual. There were some others, we found out, but there's no pictures of others. At Pine Corners in the town of Middlesex, there was one, according to, well, you know who our authority is on a lot of historical things. A lot of us had him for a history teacher. Mr. Moody. Yeah. And he was the source that about he's one of the places he mentions, the Pine Corners School, that it was probably not well constructed and they had to tear it down. But this one, 1838, so let's take ourselves back to 1838. How'd you go about building a building, you know? I have one of our members whom we said goodbye to this year is Janet Reed. Her mother and siblings went to this school, and William Ledgerwood in 1899 wrote this little thing about the school. Description of my home school building. I think he attended the school and then he became a teacher there for a little while. This old schoolhouse it's just so neat. It's in his handwriting. It got preserved in their family, and then Mom put it in her book too. This old schoolhouse is situated in the town of Potter on the side of a gentle slope facing the east. The structure is a round one made of stone about the size of the fist. I love that, because nowhere else did I read, you know, something that visually tells me the size of the fist. It is legible, but I lost my spot there. Which were brought from Lake Ontario. We were all nodding, and there's been some, over the years, there were questions. There were people that thought they were just field stones. Well, probably not those little round stones the size of a fist. Certainly the walls were made, inside were made of fieldstone, probably, and then they faced it with the cobblestones. But then some said, oh, no, they got them from Seneca Lake. And I guess there was even some, no, Canandaigua Lake. Why would they go all the way to Lake Ontario? Well, I think we know from other sources that farmers took their goods up to Lake Ontario to ship them and then brought back a load of stones. That makes sense to me. So he went on to say The stones are arranged in layers, each layer extending entirely around the building. There are about 45 of these layers between the ground and the roof. It's the only place I've read that, but he was obviously into numbers and could be. We could count and see, but the roof is cone-shaped with a chimney at the center. The building contains but one room, which is about 12 feet high and 35 feet in diameter. We enter the room through a large door facing the east. At the right of the doors is a cupboard where the girls place their hats and dinner baskets. At the left is a similar cupboard which the boys use. From the end of, well, it goes on. The seats, we do have a replica of the, I'll leave this up here. The seats originally did go around. This drawing was done by Maud Reed and her sister. It was Janet Reed's sister, mother, and Ann. So at first they went around, but later they changed it. The teacher was in the middle. Now I have this other source, which is a book written for her grandchildren by my Aunt Beulah, my mother's older sister. And she says, they lived in Rushville for a few years because her father had been ill, but they lived right up the hill from where the school was, on Voorhees Road. When we moved back to the farm in 1909, I started school at the district school, the usual one-room schoolhouse. However, this was an unusual one in shape. It was round, made of cobblestones with a chimney in the middle. Since the roof slanted down to the wall, it looked like a jug without a handle and was usually called the round stone jug. Now, where did it go? Okay. Aunt Beulah got into ceramics, and she lived in Pennsylvania later, and did this plate, the round stone jug. Uh-oh. I see a problem. Well, number one, she's got 1837. Well, they started talking about it in 1837 to 1919. Actually, it burned in 1920. But there's been a lot of confusion about that, including recently in the newspaper article I read about the school. There was, Mr. Moody's book, he says it burned in 1919. But we have copies of newspaper articles. January 20th, 1920. It burned. Whenever it burned, it burned. And I guess I shouldn't get too hung up on what years, but anyway, she drew the round stone jug on there, which is pretty neat. So she said, I believe when Dad attended the school, this was Charlie, my grandfather and the grandfather of some of us here, and the great-grandfather of Barbet. He was born in 1870, so he went to that school. And she says, and Aunt Beulah was born in 1899. When Dad attended the school, the pupils sat on benches which were situated around the outside wall with desks in front. However, we had regular desks in rows with a teacher's desk in front. We had a library, she says, with very few books. My favorite was Heidi. We also had an organ, which I believe was unusual. And a couple of the students in my mother's book remembered that there was an organ in this little building.
It was probably a pump organ.
Probably, yeah.
They don't need to be tuned.
Right, yeah, it would be. So, let's see, where's that? Well, anyway, there's stories about getting there. She told about, in the winter, if the snow was too deep, Dad would take us, but we usually walked. The best fun came when there was a crust on the snow. We would leave the road, climb the fence, and slide down a hilly field. It wasn't too good for the seats of the leggings which we wore, but it was much fun. At the end of the school year, we always had a picnic, including our mothers, younger children, and perhaps others to enjoy it with us. So, well, did you ever slide down that hill?
Way back when,
Yeah. So you know what a thrill that probably was. He said it's a gentle slope, but I would say it's more of a steep thing. Probably going back home was a steep thing. Well, so otherwise, life in the one-room school was kind of like the stories you hear of other one-room schools. That, you know, all 8 grades with one teacher. It's a little hard to imagine for me. And being a teacher there. Now, my mother, it burned in 1920, and my mother wasn't going to the school then. They were living in Rushville then, but the next year they came back, and she finished her training. It was still called the Roundstone District, but they built the white frame. I've got pictures of it here. Well, does anybody here know where that building ended up? Rushville, yeah, and where in Rushville?
Across from the cemetery.
Right, across from the cemetery. Not sure how they got it. I don't know. The people, the trustees and all, they really wanted to rebuild this school. And I've got pictures of the walls. I mean, it was a chimney fire, happened in the night, so that was lucky. And they really wanted to rebuild it. The walls were still standing, but the big bad state of New York Education Department said, no, you gotta have a better school. You gotta have a, you know, like the other schools, a white frame wood school. And,
The light coming.
oh, the light coming in, well,
Something about the light.
yeah, we always heard, you see how big these windows were, not very big, but that was, the state said, you gotta have better light, better windows. But what I remember hearing, and maybe my cousins remember, it wasn't better, the windows were all on the north side, and you didn't get the good light in the winter. But I mean, people, they were not happy that they didn't get to have their unique school, and who could blame them? It was pretty, I think people, you know, went on their Sunday afternoon drives, and they drive over and see the Roundstone Schoolhouse. Their Sunday afternoon drives in their with their horses. Well, maybe not in 1920. Well, yeah, I don't know. Anyway, they did build a new school, and that was there until 1938, when centralization came along. So rebuilt it in 1921, I guess, the new. For a year, or for the rest of that year, they met apparently at a stone house or some sort of stone building on the Boots property. Is that what we think? And then they came back to the wood frame school. And my mother actually taught there after she went to training class. I think she taught for 3 years in the 1929-30 in that. So that's why it was a special place to her, and she needed to write this book about Through the Door, which we're very glad she did, because it's so good to have sources. Like, one thing I definitely learned is you don't believe everything you read in the newspaper. Like this, it burned in 1919, or maybe it burned in, you know, or maybe something else, or maybe something else later. Yeah. So anyway, I think that's, well, yeah, there's a little discrepancy about who bought the schools. Schools, you know, mostly they went back to the farmer whose field it was on, or there were different arrangements, I think. But the trustees sold it to, some accounts say Bert Walther, who was where Ed Moberg lives, I think, right?
His name's up in the grain.
Yeah, so I don't know, one newspaper account said he bought it, but then somebody else bought it, Lester Dunton, right, in Rushville. And it got moved to Rushville anyway, and it's still there, it's a home today across from the cemetery.
What were you gonna say? What were you gonna say?
Yeah, okay.
And 245 by Rushcoe aside?
No, it's cemetery.
Up by the cemetery.
On Castle Street,
Okay.
corner of
so
Castle Street
region.
and Warren Street.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a house there. Well, okay, and one thing, I didn't realize till a year or so ago, I saw some of these little clippings, that school, when it replaced this, was built by, I'm gonna get it wrong, William Middlebrook. Who, oh, yes, you know. Great-grandfather of, of Paul Middlebrook and Lee Williams. And so, I guess that was on the tour. Was that on the tour that you went by the house this year? Everything that Mr. Middlebrook had worked on. So, I think that's about all I really have. Oh, another one of my sources was the class of '54 yearbook in, well, yeah, I didn't talk about the man who gave these. There was quite a dedication of the Wager Memorial photographs. This guy, Anson Wager, now is there anybody here that's related to him? I know there's people around the area that, he was from East Hill.
My kids are.
That's right. Right. Upper Hill Road, up a few miles from where we live. Yeah. He grew up there, and he ended up, what was he? He ended up in Ottawa, Canada, with a government position, some sort, but he wanted to memorialize his parents. And I think the first one actually was the old brick school in downtown Middlesex. He had a mural made from that, and that one has been restored, right? Yes, that's the one with the, and the Overacker Schoolhouse, that was one. And he started out with, like, I guess 3 that he wanted, where his parents had gone. Oh, one is the East Hill School with boys climbing the flagpole. That one hangs in our Middlesex Town Hall. A couple of them do. We really didn't have any more room for more things to hang, so it's nice it's come home to Potter, this one. So he's the one that donated them. 1953 was when they made the addition to the school, to Middlesex Valley. Back when we needed more room, and they needed more room, and they needed more room. And now we've got too much room. It's cool. But anyway, they had a big party and dinner and open house and unveiled all these, or some of them, and then he made more. And now we have them, and we're trying to do things with them. Somebody answered the Facebook that you put on. Several people remembered seeing them. Somebody, I can't remember the name, wasn't a name I recognized. Wouldn't it be wonderful to do a replica?
Yeah.
Now, I want to know who wants to volunteer to get that property back and build a brownstone school. Wouldn't that be wonderful?
When did the walls actually come down? How
Well,
did it stand there?
they had to have come, they built the new school on the same site.
Oh,
Although there's been some confusion. I mean, I've read in 1988 or something, I think. I don't know. There was a newspaper article that said you can still see the walls. I don't think you can see anything. Do you, Patty? I think on that corner, I think there's nothing left. But if anybody wants to volunteer to pick field stones, and I mean, think about it, 1838. What tools did they have?
The stones are probably still there. In other words, they didn't haul them away, they just dug a hole and pushed them in.
Right.
So I would submit that they're all still there, just buried.
But that is farmed, is it not? There. I mean, it's been plowed probably a few times around there. Well, anyway, it's an interesting thing to think about. We could all take our carts and go up to Lake Ontario. Make sure we got our fist. There's a wonderful, I don't know if anyone's ever been to the Cobblestone Museum up in, it's Childs, is that the name of the, it's north of Albion. Actually, they've done a lot of research, and a woman who, she's not here today, she would try to come, she lives in Penfield or somewhere. She's done a lot of research on cobblestones and was very excited to hear our story about this and everything. And they actually put my mother's book on their website. So if anybody wants to read it there, you can.
Was that Babette Huber? Babette Huber
No.
and Victor, she wrote a book on cobblestones.
Okay, no, this is Karen Crandall, her name is. She's a retiree from Kodak or something and just really interested and did a lot of research on this. And came to Middlesex and saw the things we have, drove up to to see the sign and everything. So I think that's, unless someone has a question I can't answer.
Do we know who actually made the photographs?
I don't
The
think so.
photographer?
I think he got, probably this one he got from some local person. I mean, we know that the Overacker School one is the picture that appeared in National Geographic.
Uh-huh.
And
That's not a snapshot from the ground.
I don't know,
The ones on the hill,
That's
Elaine,
professional.
in
but
school 6, didn't we find a photographer's name? It was different than who took the rest of the pictures.
oh, you mean Gordon, somebody, or?
Because it was aerial view, you know,
Oh,
the
the aerial.
last was one person, and I'm not sure where the other one was taken. The flagpole, that was a different photo.
Yeah. But I think he, I don't know. I think when he decided that he wanted to do more schools, he went looking for,
Must have
and
been.
there are a lot of snapshots, and I have a lot of different ones in my album here. And there's one that shows the church that was across, which we don't know much about. But way back, you see in the atlases, there was a church across the way, but with almost no pictures of it. But the shed, now this is the back. Mom's book is about the shed on the front, which originally the door opened and the shed was over here. And then they built a new shed to keep the wind and all from going in and out the door. They covered that door, the shed. Pictures that show that. But I think that's about it.
Well, thank you very much.
Kept it
Thank you.
under-
I always like to hear you very organized, and this thing was go very smoothly. More people showed up than expected, and Ken Poole showed up. And this is how I appear to be a genius. We don't know how this picture was blown up. We do know that Jane Loomis actually painted it, and she did a lot of painting here. Is she from Naples or Penn?
Well, it's a great story, and it goes right back to
And
Middlesex.
Ken's gonna tell it.
Yeah. When I moved to Naples in 1975, Jane Loomis was my next door neighbor. At that time, she was 20 years older than me. I was 29, she was 49. And she was very shy, very inward, and she didn't really get out and talk, you know. So we met at the driveway, you know, talking. But she told me about a painting she had painted when she was in high school, and that painting hangs in the Naples High School Academy called Naples in the Vicinity. And if you go into the main office of Naples, there's a huge mural on the wall. It's very well done, and she did that while she was a junior in high school. And that painting and a couple other images paved the way for her to go to Syracuse University and graduate magna cum laude from the School of Visual Arts. So that gives you a little bit, but that's the good part of her life. There's a whole other part. I can give you the 10-minute version, I can give you the 5-minute version, I can have drinks at the bar with it. So it's all up to you. However, her father, Glenn Loomis, was from Middlesex. Now, Glenn Loomis was adopted, and on the 19th census, it says adopted child, you know, adopted son. But his father died before the census, so we have no idea if he had a father. We only know that he was living with his mother, who had a very odd name, and it was and I can't remember, it's like Wanika or something like that. It was a very strange name. So he's this is why he's important. He's adopted. He moves into Naples in about 1920, becomes a bookkeeper, I don't know where. Marries Bertha Warren. The Warren family is a big family in Naples. They adopt 2 children. Okay? And the girls they adopted was Jane. Now, Jane and her twin sister, which she never knew about until she was in her 40s, and they were from Otisco, New York. And I have found them on the New York State birth records. There they are. One, the numbers are right after one another. Born in Otisco. They showed up somehow in Naples, and the family story tells me this. Now, this is family history, so you have to take it for granted. There were 2 girls. One was kind of sickly, one wasn't. They took the one that wasn't sickly. And that was Jane. And the other one went back. Now, the interesting part is, Jane's original name was Dortha. I mean, D-O-R-T-H-A, Bertha Addison. Her sister was Betty. Years later, she meets her sister again. It's still Betty. But Jane's parents, the Warrens, had changed her name from Bertha to Jane. But she kept the middle name. So it's Jane Bertha Warren. I always thought when I was originally doing the research that the Bertha was from her stepmother's name. But it wasn't. It goes back a generation. And I'm trying to untangle that right now. So she comes to Naples in about she was born in 1927 in Otisco. She arrives in Naples, I think in 1931, because she's not on the 1930 census. And people were pretty good back then about putting names down. They didn't, there wasn't a lot of hiding people. So she's not there. She arrives, she's 4 years old. She immediately goes to Naples Central School, which was a 1 school. It's right where the school is now, in Naples. It was just on Academy Street, facing the other way. It was a smaller version of what you see, a very small version. She goes to that school. She does really well. She's a straight A student. She plays in the band. She plays in the orchestra. She sings in the choir. She does all the artwork for the yearbook. She goes to Syracuse. Her teacher wrote this, which I have, a copy of a glowing recommendation for her. So she goes to Syracuse, and it gets quiet while she's at Syracuse. She wasn't the kind of person who left a footprint. She just went there, did her work. We have a couple pictures, but we don't have much about her. I do have a graduation picture from Syracuse, and it's classic, sweater, pearls, Now, her father, meanwhile, Glenn Loomis, he was a rock star at the time. He came back to Naples. He owned the Van Dyne Oil Company. He owned 3 or 4 gas stations, and he owned the gas station right next door to them on Sprague Street in Maine. There's a little gas station across from the old Methodist church. What you see now is not the church. That's one of the things I've learned. You can't look at things now and say, well, this is what he owned. And it was a completely different looking building at the time. But he owned that gas station. He died in 1963 in a car accident back in Middlesex on 245. Gets shuffled off to Thompson Hospital, which was the Thompson Hospital next to the Wood Library, not the one you think of today. And then they shuffled him off to Rochester, and he died in Rochester. So he's dead in 1963. Jane was away. Well, we'll get back to that. So Jane graduates from Syracuse, comes back to Naples, and paints up a storm. She's taking commissions for things like this. She's taking commissions for large paint pictures of the lake. She does portraits. She does your dog. She does all kinds of paintings of the Naples Valley. She's going like mad. She's offered a job to teach in the Naples School District. She goes in and teaches for a couple of weeks and resigns. She says, I'm not a school teacher. I was never trained to be a school teacher. I was trained to be a painter. I don't know how to do pots. I don't know how to do, all these little odds. So, plus, And I say this, and you never dare quote me, Jane was on the spectrum. You know, she grew up with no brothers or sisters. She grew up from a family, her father, who had no brothers and sisters, and she ended up, you know, so she just was not used to, I don't know, you ever had a full classroom of 10 kids, you know, running around trying to teach them art? She just wasn't up for that. So she resigned the position, and a guy named George Gould came to town, took the job, and taught for 1 year in Naples. Then he went to Pressburg and taught for 1 year, and then he went to Madison High School up in Greece and taught for the rest of his career. We'll talk about him in a second. So, here's Jane, out of school. Now, how do I say this gently? She's in Naples. She's an artist. The guys in Naples in 1951 were probably not artists. You know, they probably were, you know, they were probably grape farmers, you know, and farmers and dairy farmers. Naples was just a farm community, like all our communities right there. And here comes this guy, single, tall, good-looking guy, art teacher, and she probably never had a boyfriend in her life. You know, she meets him, and as I say, the rest is history. She marries him. They shuffle off to Greece, where his family had a farm on Ladder Road. 1961 comes along. They've been married for 5 years or so. They adopt 2 kids, all within a year. One's 3 months old, and one's a baby. You know, I have a picture of her sitting there with the 2 kids on her lap. And she looks like a cat whose tail's caught in the door. I just think it was too much for her. Her relationship with her husband was not good. She probably wasn't the easiest person to get along. All she wanted to be was a painter. And that whole time, she was coming back to the Naples and doing commissions. Families like the Hawks family, they had all their kids painted by her. You know, they had, Mrs. Hawks kept her in constant paintings. You know, she was always doing paintings for her, and she built a huge body of work. So, the marriage blows up. She moves back to Naples, and she's living next door to me on Reed Street, in this little house that her mother was living in because her husband had died. And when her husband had died, Glenn, I'll get you back to Glenn Loomis, they sold the gas station, and they lived right next to the gas station in a house there. They sold that, and then they moved to this little house that was next to my house. Mother dies 2 years later. She's living there, it's 1975. She's been there for 3 years. Glenn left her in good shape. She never worked a day in her life. She never had a job. She just did paintings. That's all she ever did was paintings and watercolor. Left her in good shape for the time. She left her with an estate in 1963 for about $200,000. And she bought a house that cost $14,000. You know, she was fine. You know, and she had no brothers and sisters to share with. It was all hers. So, her mother dies. She lives there, and then she builds a house up in what they call Warren Hill, which is south of Naples, where all the Warren family, it was almost like a clan. They all had houses on this farm that they had broken up and built houses, and she lived there. Well, she lived there until the year 2000. And in the last 4 years of her life, she had Parkinson's disease, stopped painting, and ended up dying in 2000. Her death certificate says heart attack, pneumonia. I think it was all tied into the Parkinson's, and that was it. So she had this, I titled my book, The Arc of an Artist. She had this 20-year period where she painted up a storm, and then was gone. And if you talked to her on the street, nobody knew she was a painter. She never mentioned it, never pushed it. She was very shy and very to herself. So, that's the 5-minute, 10-minute story of Jane Loomis. If you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them after this, you know, but she was a remarkable woman. The paper that I'm writing will be available, if you're interested, through the Naples Historical Society. And it'll probably be done in February, if something doesn't happen, like I get all kinds of new information and everything goes, goes the hell in
We have a
the.
photo of her.
Yes, right, oh yeah, that's a great picture of her too, by the way.
Her with
Yeah.
Anson,
Mhm.
shoulders.
Yeah.
So,
This is interesting, this piece here, because as a curator said, back when this thing was done, it was hard to get a black and white print that big.
Yeah.
I don't know who made it.
That's what I mean, it had to be a,
I think it was done at Kodak.
yeah, well, absolutely.
Because nobody had trays like this. I mean, I have a degree in photography. Nobody I knew in 1950s could put out a print this big. You know, so it's interesting now. But what's kind of consistent is all color photographs were hand colored back then. And there were companies, in fact, there was a company in Rochester that I almost bought back in 1990 that made hand-colored dyes for photographs. And they sold them all over the country, and people could buy those, and you could hand-color any black and white photograph. And there's a whole world of people out there still doing it. It's one of those photographic niche people who are hand-painting photographs. So that is interesting, and to hear there's more of them. In Middlesex, you have more. Are they Jane Loomis painted?
well, this one, this is
We
the,
know
old-
this-
this is the Overacre School.
Yeah, that's the Overacre School,
Yeah.
but are there more of these images that are painted by Jane Loomis?
There's some, I think one was not painted by her, the rest were painted by her.
See? This is why I came today, because I knew I'd find something else I didn't.
If you come in Wednesday morning, at
Yeah.
06,
Yeah.
at 9 o'clock, we'll give you all the information.
I know, I have to give up a ski day, but I'll be there. All right, so anyway, any questions, I'll meet you over coffee, but there is the short story of Jane Loomis.
So,
See you again.
next we have Gary Albright, the conservator, who's nationally renowned. When I first met him, Dan Rubens and I took the Overacre Corner School up there, and I had a big resume from Gary, but I didn't read it. And so we go up there and we showed him the painting. He said, well, the first thing I do, I got to scrape this off the board. I think Dan and I both turned white. And we left the building, and we're driving back, and I said, I want to get a for sale sign. That painting goes back in ruin, I'm just going to sell my house. I subsequently find out that he has a little bit of a reputation. He worked on the Home Swagger baseball card, probably worth a bit. Approximation, Emancipation, he worked on that?
Emancipation Proclamation.
Emancipation. Thank you. So he's renowned, he's done all our paintings for us. He's a great guy, baseball fan, very curious about life, very professional,
He's not prejudiced.
and a good guy. He likes going out and have a beer and cheeseburger, so that won me over right away. So anyway, Gary Albright.
It's hard to believe. I was trying to calculate before I came here how long, well, when Lynn and I first communicated. The best I could come up with was spring of 2012. So you know, it's been like 10 years now, a little over 10 years. In that time period, I've actually treated 4 of these. Wynn has gotten the grants, and we've totaled over $20,000 to treat them. You're thinking, $20,000, I could do a lot with that. But to treat things this big takes a lot of time. And that's where the money comes in, and that's why it takes so much money. And the supplies aren't cheap. The 4 that I've treated was the Overacre Corner Schoolhouse, which was finished in 2015, the East Hill Schoolhouse, was treated in 2016, the Old Brick Schoolhouse, which apparently is the original Middlesex High School, which was completed in 2019, and then this one, which was completed in 2021, August 2021. They all came to me like this, without the cover glass, nothing on top of them. And that is why they had to come to me, because without any protection over the years, they had suffered. And from what I've heard, and having been stored in the boiler rooms and things like that, they had gotten dirty, they had been scratched, some of them even had tears in them. people had tried to clean them, I don't know, maybe oiling the frames or something, and got, well, you can see it up there, there's like a line across the top. I don't know, maybe that happened when someone thought that there was a cover on it and tried to clean it, who knows? But something was applied to it. They had tons of fly specks on them, all over them. They also had a lot of mold damage. So these brown spots all over the place. A couple of them even had water damage, where somebody had either spilled, dropped some water on it somewhere, and it stained them a brownish color. So between the fly specks, the mold, and the water, some of them were pretty disfigured, including this one. This one had quite a bit of disfiguration as well. So they came to me after we had received the grants, and I got to treat them. And that included, as Rin said, the first thing was to get them off of this rigid support that they were on. That's because the rigid support wasn't really helping the condition of the photographs. It did keep them safe for those 50, 60, 70 years that they were around. But it had also caused other problems. In combination with the environmental conditions they were subjected to, the rigid supports keep the photograph from expanding and contracting. And so it caused, you can't probably see it with your naked eye, but it caused tiny fissures and cracks throughout the whole photograph. And which prevented me from doing too much, what I would call real treatment to the photograph. I would not be able to use water on it, for example, because the gelatin would have fallen off of the photograph during that type of treatment. And we would have lost the image completely, so we didn't want to do that. So as Wynn indicated, I actually took a thin spatula, an artist spatula, painting spatula, and basically shaved the photograph off of the rigid support. And then had to clean up the reverse, getting off the residual amounts, using a little moisture and some more shaving of the reverse. When it got wet, the adhesive would loosen up, and I was able to scrape that off. Then I could mend it with, we used Japanese paper, or just a special thin paper, and wheat starch paste, just to do the mending of anything that needed to be done. And then I mounted them onto a new rigid support, but I didn't mount it overall. I just mounted around the edges and put little slits in the mount, in the hinges, so that if it expands and contracts, the photograph will be able to expand and contract some with the changes in environment. But it needed that support because they are so big. And I, like the rest of you, have always thought that they were probably done by Kodak, because who else would have been able to do something like that? Particularly in the early 50s. I just don't think that was available to anybody else. So once it's off the mount, back onto a new mount, I then had to do the aesthetic part. And that meant filling in losses and scratches with watercolors, pastels, pencils, that sort of thing, trying to match it up. And even more difficult, get off the fly specks, which had to be done all individually with a little scalpel. You know, you just sit there and pick away at them for however long it takes. And then to deal with the mold spots, which some of them were like, many of them were about the size of a dime. And so I had to deal with those as well. Sometimes I scraped them off and painted in the area. Other times I just painted over the stained area. But all of that was done with watercolors, gouaches. Gouaches are watercolors which are opaque. So I could paint over something, and colored pencils. And once it's done, it went back into the frames with the cover glass this time. These are plexi, so you have to, you can't really clean this too much or it'll scratch. But we didn't want to go with glass because it would be so heavy, it'd be difficult to deal with. This happens to be, I think, the smallest of the ones we've treated. The other ones are larger. And when I first started treating this, I lived in a pretty good sized house with a large basement, and you could go in through the outside or down the nice big stairs. Well, then I moved into a townhouse, and the steps going to the basement, they got to be like this high. I have to be careful with my head hitting the times. And there was a landing, and then you had to turn and go down the rest of the thing. One of these things was over 70 inches long, and I had to figure out ahead of time how to get it into the basement. You couldn't just go down and turn it. You guys saw me do this. Right? I made a model out of cardboard and figured out that I had to take it down this way, kick the bottom out, turn it halfway, move it around, pull the bottom back, let the top go down, and then go down the steps. And if I did it any other way, it wasn't going to fit. And then I had to work in the basement, and then I had to get it back up, reverse it back.
Without destroying it.
Yeah. Well, actually, they are insured while they're with me, but not from anything that I might do to them, but from vandalism. Maybe we could have called it vandalism if we had done it. And so here they are now, and you can enjoy them. So they should last quite a long time, as long as they're kept in a relatively stable environment. They are black and white silver photographs, which are generally a pretty permanent process. They have faded some over the years from light exposure. When they were out of the frames, you could see where the parts that had been covered by the frame were darker and more color than the rest of the parts. But they still look pretty good.
What did she use to paint it?
I think she used washes.
Washes?
Yeah.
Okay. Did she use a wash over the black and white, or
Yeah.
did she actually?
Yeah, she might have used watercolors.
Okay.
But, you know, if you look, how much color is really here? It's kind of hard to tell.
Yeah.
You know, there might even be some in what looks like black and white, but I think if it was, I think it's faded out quite a bit. But the blues and the whites, most of what you see, these clouds would have been whiter originally. They have discolored over the years, but they would have been white at one point in time. And the blues would have been deeper.
So it's paper,
Yeah.
a special kind of.
Well, it's photographic paper,
Okay.
typical black and white, silver gelatin photographic paper. So there would have been a beautiful black and white print here, and then she hand colored over that.
She might have painted those clouds. She was a very good cloud painter.
I think she did.
I mean, all her paintings have beautiful clouds on her.
I
They
think
may
she
not
did.
even have been there.
Yeah, I don't think those are in the print. I think she added them, and she definitely added leaves to the trees. Because this one was taken in winter time. So she added leaves to the trees.
Yeah.
There was some other damage right here, and I'm not sure if she corrected it, because maybe it was a mistake in the printing, or if it had been scratched at some point and somebody else in the art class had gone over and tried to tone it in. Any of you that have tried to match colors know that it's not the easiest thing to do. Any other questions? I think there's one left to do.
Yes, we're at the Rushville High School.
Rushville High School.
Oh, dear.
We're going to submit that this year, and
Hope that
we'd like to have you make a conservatory.
She was very good about documenting her work on the back of things. Is there anything on the back?
No.
Nothing.
No, I was looking for that.
Because she always put her name, date, and everything else on the back.
Nothing. I saw no names, no dates.
Isn't that amazing?
Now, you know, with the question, Nancy, you got it.
Yes, Nancy Middlebrook, my niece, has been doing the family history online for eBay. Someone had a postcard of this photograph. And I was just looking to see if I had it. I don't know if there was any background or anything like that, but she said someone had it for sale and she was
That wouldn't surprise me, because
yeah.
Here's one, actually, in my collection.
I think it
It's
is.
a postcard.
Yeah, I guess this picture's entrusted in our care. Our main concern is not to scratch the plexiglass. Other than that, everybody keep the environment.
keep the environment as stable as Well, normally it'd be, yes, it would be good to do something
We
like
did that
the
already.
fluorescent lights. It's
Yeah,
already
okay.
done,
Already.
okay. And otherwise, I looked when I came in, I didn't see any heat sources under here, so if there's heat directly underneath, the heat can come up and cause the print to contract
Okay.
too tightly. But it's good that it's away from the sun, so that's a good thing. Yeah.
This is the sunniest day Potter's had in,
I was going to say, you guys do really well compared to what I get in Honeywell Falls. We don't get many sunny days.
Do you have a before photo?
Not with me.
No, but you have one at home?
Yeah.
Oh, good, all right.
Yes. Wind has-
we may have one here.
The problem is the object is so big, and I don't really have great conditions for taking before and after photographs, particularly large objects. So you don't see the fly specks because they're too small. That thing. But yes, we have. I always take before photos. And
I have those available. This is, I'll send you the copy.
Oh,
I'll send
okay,
you.
one.
Very, given our Wednesday morning, this is ski day.
It's killing me. But the skiing's not too good right now, so it won't be that bad.
Well,
Pray for rain.
thank you very much. Let's pay to advertise on time. First of all, we get all our grants from the Greater Hudson Heritage Network down in Hudson Valley. Dan Robinson found them in 2012. We got a conservation assessment program, which Gary is involved with, which helped us to get all these pictures done. And we had a total of 7 or 8, I think. We had 5 big ones, and this I said, we had 1 left at Rushville High School, which is in Rushville right now. And we'll get that submitted this year. We've been very fortunate. We've submitted 5 times, and we've got 4 of them done. And I was trying to be too smart in the last submission, so they rejected it, so I changed my wording. And that's how we got this one. That's being clever.
Wynn's been very good at getting the grants because it's not always easy. They don't always like to give repeat grants. So for him to get 4 is pretty
Well,
impressive.
we're pleased with them. This is our last one, so that's one of the approaches I use. Anyway, we have a cake over there, which has a picture of the school, a painting on it, and we have coffee. We'd like to have you socialize a little bit. We really thank you for coming out. You can join the Middlesex Heritage Group for $10 a year. That will get you.
I've taken in one already today.
What's that?
I've taken in a membership today. A
Made
renewal.
the whole trip worth it.
And I wanted, how many of these do we think we have? Dan knows. Hundreds, or more than 100. Binders with various topics. And this one happens to be schools of, I think it's Jerusalem, Potter, Italy. And we have others that are just Middlesex High School, or others that are businesses in Middlesex. Anyway, we have a whole lot of, you could spend days just pouring through here. And I did find a postcard in here that, if you want to look at.
Did it have a
And I got the pictures of the walls that were still
Did
standing.
it have a background, the photo, or the postcard? Clouds in the sky or anything like that?
No,
No, okay.
but I think there's another one over here that might be,
I tried to count the books one time and got tired. So
yeah.
I was going to make that statement. We haven't used many books.
Yeah.
But we also have about 1,000 family files, which if you families from the area, we'd love to have you stop in any Wednesday morning.
We get requests all the time, like, what was that one this last week? We get an email
Yep.
from wherever.
For about
My
cemeteries and
ancestors
families.
are buried in Middlesex, can you help me?
Yeah, but we, at the real draw to our Wednesday mornings, 10 o'clock, we have a coffee. And we have homemade cookies so if you come at that time, you relax, go through our files, donate $10.
You weren't there last Wednesday, there were no cookies.
Wasn't my turn, I was the week before.
And I was the week before that, and I said, we don't need them, everybody's had so many.
Which happened first? I wasn't there, there was no cookies, and I wasn't there.
Oh, boy.
Paul?
Yes, I'm Paul Mitchell, and involved with the Heritage Group and also Town of Middlesex. And we've mentioned a few times about, offhandedly, we got these grants. Getting these grants was not easy. Wynn and Dan both deserve a round of applause for making this happen.
And we're also forever grateful to Gary.
Oh my God.
Yeah.